Maria Kelson, welcome back to the Rocky Mountain Writer Podcast.
Thanks, Mark.
Great to have you back on. We talked last December about the news about the acquisition of your first mystery novel, which, as that podcast covered in some detail, was quite a while in the making and finally going from desk drawer to light of day, which is absolutely fantastic. And here we are a couple of weeks away from the launch, September 10th, of Not the Killing Kind.
Yeah, it's exciting to have the actual day right around the corner.
Yeah. I'm sure you've held the actual book.
Yes, I got the actual book. Mail delivery is a little tricky where we live now, so it took me a little hot minute to get my author copies, but I was so excited to see them. And in fact, my agent said, there's just going to be no feeling like it when you hold that first novel in your hands. And she was right. You think, wow, it really happened.
Yeah. Did you get a whole box?
Whole box.
Yeah. Did
Yeah.
you pass them? What are you doing with them? Are you using them for marketing? Are you passing them out to friends?
Yeah. Some of them are going to folks who helped me with research or with critiques, but others I'm toting with me to events. I have some events lined up in Wyoming, and then some events lined up in the Baltimore, D.C. area. And one of those events is the Creatures, Crimes, and Creativity Conference. So your Rocky Mountain fiction writers audience might be interested in that. That's in Columbia, Maryland, near
Wow.
Baltimore. And yeah, as the name suggests, Creatures, Crimes, and Creativity, they cover genre fiction of all kinds. And I've been to that conference before. It's just a really friendly, great environment, as your friendly, great Rocky Mountain fiction writers will appreciate. So that is one of those tote your
Yeah.
own wares
Yeah.
book sale situations. So I'll be there with my many pounds of
Yeah.
books
Check one suitcase for personal things and one suitcase for books.
for books. That's right.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. Um, well, I want to come back to marketing in a second and just talk about some of the things you've learned in the buildup between, last fall and now, which probably felt like it was just maybe a minute or two ago that last fall. Maybe it's been a really fast few months here getting ready.
In some ways, it's been fast, and in some ways, it's been long because there have been so many tasks along the way and so many corrections and proofs to go through, and then a lot of planning for the events. But I don't know if I said this on the last podcast, but it's something I've been trying to remind myself. I'll say to my husband, these are the problems I wanted. These are author problems.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. Well, I want to get into all the things you've learned in the last 8, 9, 10 months. Um, but the first thing I wanted to ask you about was the change of title, because when we did the last podcast in December of last year, this novel was called The White Redwood, I believe.
Yes.
And we talked about that title. Tell us about the what went into the discussion and how many other title options you went through before you landed on Not the Killing Kind. And also, how hard did you fight for White Redwood, and did that matter?
Yeah, that's a great question. Luckily, I wasn't too attached to the White Redwood in terms of it being a final title. I had learned from publishing my two poetry books that the title comes down to what the marketing team and the editorial team and the publishing team believe will be an eye-catching title, a title people will respond to, and they're the pros. So I that wasn't a particular element of the book that I felt like I had to go to the mat for. But the process in the case of Crooked Lane Books was they had sent me an author questionnaire where they asked for quite a bit of info about the book, my thoughts on what the jacket copy should be, my thoughts on who the target audience were. And then among those questions were my ideas for 10 different titles. So that actually took more time than anything else, coming up with
Yeah.
ten different titles.
Wow.
But in the end, they made a mashup of two of my suggestions to come up with the current title, Not the Killing Kind. And I thought it sounded good. I liked it. It didn't bother me that they changed my original title. So that was the process. They took a mashup of two of my 10 suggestions.
Do you remember the two pieces that merged?
Um, uh, no,
Yeah,
no, one of
yeah.
them, yeah, no, I don't. I don't.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So in the end, you were okay with the title choice.
Yeah, I liked it. I thought, well, yeah,
Yeah,
that sounds good. That sounds good. Yeah.
yeah. No, that's good. I'm glad you're happy with it. And the cover?
Yeah, the cover, they did a nice job. There's a little, I brought the postcard. There's a little picture of it here on the postcard. And for those listening, it's a silhouette, which is a book cover trend that apparently is still rolling along, having a silhouette on the cover. But I like what they did with this silhouette is a silhouette of a woman's face, a young woman's face or a girl's face. And then it has redwood trees kind of shadowed within the silhouette. And the book takes place in the redwood country, and it does involve young people. A mother is trying to free her teenage son, her 18-year-old son, from jail when he's accused of a murder. So I like that it captures that there's young people. It captures that it's set in the redwood country. Oh, and they have block red font. So listeners can go to their shelves and see how many crime novels they have that have block red font on the cover. In this
Yeah,
case, I think it's a good fit. I think it works.
yeah, that's great. Well, you've given a little kind of touched on what it's about, but before we get into what you've learned in the last 9 or 10 months, just for those who might be interested, and I know you did this on the previous podcast, but take us to the setting and the characters and give us a little tease about what it's about. And before you do that, I'll just say it's a really good mystery, and I so enjoyed reading it. And it really, the setting is so strong, Northern California, and it's just, rich and lush and dense and interesting. And then the family dynamics are the other, obviously, really strong theme throughout it in terms of protecting a child and protecting a family unit. So, but having said that, I'll throw it to you to tell us more.
Sure. I appreciate you bringing up the family angle because I know we've bonded as parents previously talking about our kids and our adult kids and listeners, when you pick up a copy, you'll see a very nice blurb from your host, Mark Stevens. So thank you
Yes,
very
indeed.
much for that, Mark. So the book is a contemporary mystery thriller set in the Redwoods in Northern California, as you mentioned. And the family dimension is that the main character is a mother and a professional in her small rural community. She runs a school that she set up for, especially to support undocumented families in her community. But her life as a school administrator and as a parent sort of comes into conflict when her son is accused of the murder of one of her former students, an undocumented boy. And she has to find the real killer to free her son. In the process of trying to find the killer, she has to really nose into the lives of these undocumented families that she thought she had known so well and uncovers some secrets along the way.
Very nice. Nicely done. I bet you're getting better and better at that.
I am getting more comfortable with it. It's so awkward at first when you start talking about your book and it's just sort of hot off the latest draft and it feels so awkward. And now that it actually exists and has been kindly validated by external sources, I can say, all right, this is an actual thing and here's what it actually does.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's some nice ethical choices and decisions that she has to make around, particularly around school and privacy and just, she's really in a tough spot, which starts early on in the book, and you just keep cranking up the squeeze on her position and what she's, sort of boxed in, and can she figure out a way to wriggle out of this tight corner?
Oh, I appreciate that. That's a kind thing to say about a novel that relies on suspense and tension. So I appreciate that. And I will say that the way that we talk in our genre about characters, as you say, being in a tight spot, having a dilemma, those kind of, the way we talk about it was a little hard for me when I started exploring the crime genre. And the way that you put it, in a bind, in a dilemma, in a tough spot, those are all things I can like move with sort of smoothly. But some people talk about torturing your character. You have to torture your character, which is in some ways very true. You have to make things as difficult emotionally as possible, and sometimes as difficult physically as possible. So I understand the concept, but the idea of torturing a fictional character, that always sort of like put up a wall for me. Like, don't you ever feel like this is a real person, even though it's not, but don't you ever feel like this is a real person we're talking about? And I don't want to do that. So you have to set aside your sort of your heart for your, you have to set aside your humane heart for your characters when you're, so to do that, I'd be interested in what you do to in order to do that. But what I do to do that is I sort of think of it as visual art, where you're working with contrasting shapes and contrasting colors. And so it's just a matter of creating conflict in literature is a way of creating contrast, analogous to creating contrast in visual art. So I have to sort of reframe it that way. But how do you do that? How do you say, okay, I'm not trying to be a good neighbor, I'm trying to be a good author for my readers? How do you make that shift?
Oh, it's a good question, never ending question. And I guess you just gotta flip that switch and say you really have to understand what the readers want and understand your audience in this case. And I really think about books in a lot of ways sometimes can be a little bit hyperbolic. They can be just a little bit over the top because um, we want to see these extreme stressful situations. In other words, who doesn't like what, I don't know about people who don't like watching um, documentaries about mountain climbing in winter. And, we want to see the steepest face with ropes and perilous pitons that don't necessarily anchor well and thin rope that frays. And, all these are all just metaphors, but we really want to put our characters in these tough spots to see their decisions because it's entertainment for us as readers to, we want to guess, what are they going to do? How far will they go? And yeah, sure, there are real people in my mind as I write, but there's also a part of me that just accepts the world I'm in, which is entertainment. And we want to see these folks really get tested. So throw a lot at them. And sometimes if it feels too much, you can always, that's what rewriting is for. Just dial it down a little bit. But yeah, we're not there for one vanilla ice cream cone after another. That's just not going to get the job done.
That's right.
Yeah. I'm really mixing my metaphors. Sorry about that.
No, that's all right. That's all right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like the vanilla. I like that you couldn't stop at vanilla. You had to make a vanilla ice cream cone. That's nice. That's nice
Yeah.
detail work there.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So, yeah, I just quickly before we move on, I will say there's a really nice action sequence too. You've got some, I won't give anything away, but it's not just offices and phone calls and meetings in your book by any means. So leave it at that.
Well, I appreciate that. Those went through the ringer in various critiques and with various kinds of feedback, all the way from, you know, great pacing to too slow to over the top to just right. So lots of conflicting feedback on those scenes. So I'm glad they worked for you.
Yeah. Well, and I'll bet they may have changed quite a bit. I'm going through developmental edits on a book that I've got coming out next year, and wow, are things changing heavily thanks to some incredibly professional eyes. Let's go through kind of what you've learned in the last 9 or 10 months, and let's start with the editing process. Did you find a lot of improvements came out of that process, both content and style, copy editing?
Yeah, I was really happy with my editing process, particularly content wise. There were the acquiring editor at Crooked Lane, Tony Kirkpatrick, offered some sort of overview suggestions of ways to make some of the relationships sharper or more meaningful. So that was something I could dive right into and get that going. And then Crooked Lane sent the book to a freelance editor for the sort of the last round before copy edits, which are the detail-y level grammar, comma type things. But the freelance editor really dove in and sort of moment by moment was making sure each scene kind of delivered on its promise. And that was really helpful because you know, as many drafts as I had done, which is 8, there were still those moments that were completed in my head, but may not have been complete on the page, or entirely complete, may not have delivered what they could deliver on the page. And so she really spotted those, gave me great suggestions for how to, just sort of complete the scene, finish the scene, like add that last layer of emotional consequence. And then the copy edits phase, what was helpful about that was reading the copy editor's detailed remarks helped me get in a more detailed mindset. So then as I was rereading with her edits, I found additional little things, little inconsistencies that no one else had found, but that I knew, you know, would bug me at the least, and at the worst, you know, might throw a reader off. You know, coming in the door on one side of the house and then that door doesn't exist on the next page, stupid things like that. So because I was reading with her sort of level of detail, I was able to see things that I hadn't seen before. So the whole process was really satisfying for me because I thought it really helped improve the book.
Yeah, that's a difficult thing to do, to read your own book at that stage, given how many times you'd been through it,
Yes.
and sort of approach it with a fresh eye, but, you know, putting on the copy editing filter, so to speak. Wow.
It is difficult. And I use the read aloud feature in Word, which some writers I know will do on like their second draft or something. They like hearing it out loud, or I know some writers will record their own voice reading it. I hadn't done any extensive read aloud in any form until that last stage, and that was super helpful.
Wow. So you just click on where the dictate button is, and it'll
Yeah.
read it back to you. Yeah,
Yeah, and you
that's
can
great.
choose which voice you want it to
Yeah,
use too, which can change your perspective on it.
yeah. As you were wrapping it up for the final time and sending it off and signing off saying done, kind of scary, you know, what's in there that I missed?
It is scary because yeah, right, you could have missed things. That's true. But I remember sending off my poetry books after the last edits being much more of a scary and kind of bizarre experience. I think because with the poetry books, I was working with a university press and they had the resources to do, I think they would send the manuscript out for 2 peer reviews, and then you would get 1 round of edits from their editor. Whereas this one, I had the freelance editor, the copy editor, the acquiring editor, my agent had input, and then of course my critique groups had input. So it did
Wow.
feel compared, you're still nervous. I was still nervous, but compared to getting those poetry books out, I felt like, well, it'll be what it'll be. I have
Yeah,
taken this this editing road as far as I can take it. And so I felt good about that at least.
yeah, that's great. So what about just getting ready for the launch? And you're with Crooked Lane Books, which is, by all the folks I know who have books published with Crooked Lane, is a really robust, well-run, highly professional um, publisher of crime fiction that, you know, I don't know how many hundreds and hundreds of titles they've put out at this point. But we all know folks like Margaret Mizushima, who's done so well with Crooked Lane, and many other folks around, both Rocky Mountain mystery writers, Rocky Mountain fiction writers. what did a lot of people think, okay, you signed a contract and you're with Crooked Lane and it's a big deal. And how much can you talk about how much they did to support you? How much did they say, here's what you got to do marketing wise to get ready? Um, how much time and effort did you put into thinking about your launch plan?
Sure. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned kind of the background on the press. I think they publish over 120 books of crime fiction a year, and I think they started another line, a book club line called Alcove Press. And I know that authors in particular, and sometimes readers are interested in that nitty gritty of who takes care of what. And so here's a good example, this little postcard here. So in terms of giveaways like postcards and bookmarks and all that, I know as a reader, I love just grabbing that stuff from authors at conferences because it helps me remember the titles I want to read and who I met at that conference. So I knew I wanted some giveaways because I am doing quite a few in-person events. So I asked them for the design and then I paid for the printing. That's how they outline it for giveaways, for handouts, things like that. But because they did the design, they came up with this little tagline, which on one side of the postcard, it says, "How far will a mother go to protect her child?" And as simple a question as that is, I don't know if I would have chosen that as a tagline. Their marketing team chose that as a tagline. And that tagline, "How far will a mother go to protect her child?" has gotten a great response from potential readers. It's a nice way to sort of instantly call out who this book is for.
Right.
It's for people who have raised kids or who care about kids as adults trying to influence kids.
Yeah.
And so I thought it was nice to have them involved in making this because they had sort of had an idea about how to distill that, that hook. And then in terms of what else they will do, they will sort of coordinate if books are available at the right time for events, but I set up events. They'll reach out to larger venues if I ask on my behalf, but they don't fund any travel to events, so that's on me. And they do support authors in terms of a lot of questions and idea sharing in terms of marketing. They have a great marketing guide. I think it's a 28-page marketing guide. And their marketing team is very active and very responsive in terms of supporting authors as the authors go through a kind of DIY marketing process.
Mhm.
So I would
Mhm.
say they're like marketing coaches. Their marketing team are
Yeah.
marketing
Yeah.
coaches, and then they will send the book out to reviewers. I was lucky enough to get a couple big reviews, which was so exciting. Publishers
Talk
Weekly
about,
and Book List,
yeah.
yeah, not anything that ever happened when I was publishing poetry. So
Yeah.
that was due to them. They sent that out. They
And
um,
both positive reviews, correct?
well, I would call Publishers Weekly positive, and I would call Book List a fair to Midland, almost
Mhm.
to the point of comic relief. It was so solidly like middle of the road that it's almost
Uh,
almost comic. But I
mhm.
thought, hey, that's how it goes. You win
Yeah.
some, you win
Yeah.
some, you meh some.
Sure, for sure.
So I was
Yep.
just happy to be in book list. So yeah, so they are a good marketing partner. They'll submit the book for a few awards, but I need to do many of my own award submissions. Um, so yeah, they're a partner. They're a partner in marketing.
Yeah. Yep. Did you hire a publicist to help you set up events?
I did not hire a publicist to set up events for two reasons. One is that I used to work in public relations for a space museum, so I have some capacity to do some of that, although
Yeah.
public relations for a nonprofit is not author PR. I
Yeah.
understand that's a distinct field. And one fine day, Dana Kay, I intend to reach out to you, but she's a great publicist, well known in the crime
Yeah.
world. But that day is not today because I received a piece of advice. Second reason I didn't do this hire right now. I received a piece of advice that if you're going to aim to have a long author career, you're going to get more bang for your buck in terms of the actual bucks you spend when you have more titles. So the more money I spend now, it's like saying, come into my store. I have one item to sell you.
Yeah.
Versus, and that a great piece of advice, I will say, comes from Becca Syme, and she's a wonderful success coach for writers. I've taken some of her online offerings, so I want to do a shout out to Becca Syme for that little piece of advice. That being said, some authors do hire a publicist right out of the gate, and it works great for them. So I don't think that advice is for everyone. I just thought it made sense for me.
Yep. I always say you got to do what's comfortable for you, and
that's right.
Yeah, and you shouldn't be out there, what's the expression? Out over your skis, where you're, you got to be
Spoken like a
comfortable.
true Coloradoan.
Yeah. So that makes a lot of sense. And if you're comfortable making those calls and setting those things up yourself, you can get it done. And so how many different events do you have coming up in the next 3 months?
Yeah, I have somewhere in the 12-ish, 13-ish range.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
And the areas for the fall are Wyoming, and then the Baltimore, DC, and then Chicago, and Colorado Springs at the end of September at Colorado College.
Nice.
Yeah, that'll be exciting. And then more events in the spring.
Do you have a connection at Colorado College? Great school, by the way.
Yes, great school, by the way, for sure. My close friend Juan Morales was just hired as a poetry faculty there, and then his friend is a fiction writer that I admire, Stephen Hayward, and Professor Hayward runs their writer series, so that's the connection there. And we talked about this at Juan's wedding a few months ago, so that's how that came about. And congratulations, Juan.
Yeah. Now, I know you've done some teaching, English teaching,
right?
A lot of it. So, are you going to teach a class there, or are you going to
Well,
talk
I'm there. Yes, I will visit some of their classes, and then I'll do a public event in the evening. So I'll be sure to send info out about that.
That's great. Excellent. Sounds like a terrific opportunity for sure.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Well, congratulations, Maria. This has been a great rundown. We did not talk about this as a last question, or I didn't remind you that we always have a last question, but have you been reading a book that you'd like to recommend, or is there an author you recently discovered you'd like to promote, or something along those lines as we kind of wrap up here?
Yes, thank you. I have two.
Oh, good. You are prepared.
Yes, my crime fiction book club that I used to be a part of, connected to a library, was I recommended the first book in Asma Zehanat Khan's Blackwater Falls series, and now that series has 2 books, so I'm looking forward to reading the second book in that series. So that the Blackwater Falls series by last name Khan, Khan, Asma Zehanat Khan is one that I recommend.
Before you get to the next one, I'll just say, don't get me going. She is such a smart, beautiful writer. And that I've read, it's ironic because in this case, I've read the second, but I haven't gone back to read the first yet.
Oh, interesting.
And the second, which of course I should pull up the title here real quick while we're talking, so we can be accurate about this. But the second one is just so layered, and the care that she puts into the relationships and the way she describes her characters is just absolutely phenomenal. Blood Betrayal, that's the name of the second one.
That's on my TBRs. That was a great pitch for it.
Yeah, I mean, she just draws you in, and there's the characters is what does it. They're not cardboard cutouts by any sense. They have rich backstories, rich lives, and she does not flinch when it comes to showing this, often racial, cultural, religious tensions. It's just, oh, she's amazing. Anyway,
I
thank
agree.
you.
I agree. I'm glad you described her books that way, because this kind of ties back to what we were talking about creating conflict, creating dilemmas, creating internal conflict and external conflict. And I find her characters' internal conflicts completely absorbing. I'm really right in there with them going, wow,
Exactly.
how are they going to figure this out? They're just, yeah, like you said, they're in a no-win situation, but they have to move forward. And that's just so engaging as a
Yeah.
reader.
Yeah. And thanks for the reminder. I need to go back and get the series off to a
Yeah,
good start. And I recently emailed her and said, "Where's number 3?" And she said, it's coming. It's just so, there's so much going on. And she sounded like it's going well, but it's just going to be a big blockbuster. I have no doubt. Anyway.
oh, I bet. I
Yeah.
I I get to see her when I'm in DC later in September for the book tour, so I'm so thrilled to see her
Well,
soon.
pass along my regards.
I
I'm
will.
in the fan club.
Yeah, me too, for sure. So yes, the first, yeah, make sure you go back and read the first one in the series. And I'm looking forward to reading the second one. Your readers have both of them to look forward to. And then the other one I'm reading right now is The Heiress by Rachel Hawkins.
Hmm.
And she wrote a great, yeah, I would call it kind of a parody of Jane Eyre, contemporary parody of Jane Eyre. It's a contemporary nanny working for an ultra wealthy family in the Southeast. And I really love that one. And so she has this, I don't think it's so new now. It might have come out earlier in 2024, maybe 2023, but it's called The Heiress. It's also set in the Southeast. Rachel Hawkins. That's a fun one.
Fantastic. Well, Maria, thank you for this today, and it's great to catch up. And so, is there another book in the works? Can you talk about that? Do you owe another book to Crooked Lane or anything?
Yeah, so some writers have contracted for 2 books, and some writers are contracted for what's called an option, where the publisher gets to say yay or nay on your next book before you send it out. So mine was the second kind, where the publisher gets to say yay or nay on the next book. There is a next book. One great thing about the way this contract was set up is that the publisher has to say yay or nay just based on a proposal. So that's nice, because then, either way, it's great. If they say no, then we get to have conversations with other publishers. If they say yes, then I continue working on this next book, knowing that it already has a home. So either way, it'll be great news. So we're in that process of discussion right now.
Good, good. Well, good luck, and we hope to hear something back here on the podcast as that process moves forward. So, yeah,
Sounds great. Yeah, great to talk to
terrific.
you.
All right, you take care, Maria. We will catch up with you down the road.
Thanks so much, Mark.